Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Aatif Hassan, founder and chairman of schools group Duke's Education. His success with Duke's has made headlines, but not everyone knows that Aatif's story goes beyond one of entrepreneurial drive and achievement. It is a genuinely inspirational tale of resilience and perseverance despite the odds. Aatif, thank you so much for joining us today. And, I've always been intrigued by those people that have so much energy, where they get it from. Like, tell us a little bit about what inspires you and what drives you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And look, I just love life. I love what I do. I've learnt to surround myself with, if there are two types of people in the world, there's radiators and drains. Radiators that sort of give off energy and excite you and heat you, and drains that sort of sap your energy. Be very precise over who you meet, who you interact with, who your friends are, and be very purposeful in doing that, really. But yeah, I mean, it can be a depressing world if you open the news and papers and see what's happening out there. Or turn it on its head and go, look, this is a really exciting generation to be around. So much technological change, so much happening, so much conversation about purpose and unity. And you really feel that actually there's something changing.
And so when you think of that and the lessons for your own kids as an example, I often tell my kids, surround yourself with the best people. They come to affect everything that you do. When you think about your partners, always think very carefully. That being said, in the inspiration story that you give, that we are surrounded by incredible things going on all the time, driven by wider societal trends and advances. What's on your mind today in terms of what's driving things forward? Is it the technology? Is it the politics? Is it just the opportunity?
I think in a super fast world that we live in, whilst you have to hold on to the coattails of the rocket and embrace it and just get yourself a seat and ride with it, the paradox is our children, and I take this in the widest context, not just Yusuf and Isla and my two, but the young people that we all strive to serve, need to learn to, in a digital world, to be analog and just have that sort of sense of stillness. And with that comes so much. It gives you clarity. It gives you understanding of purpose. It gives you that ability to be with yourself and really understand your emotions. And that's the first step in leadership. We know that. It's personal mastery. It's self-awareness. It's lead from oneself. And if young people can learn an aspect of that, I mean, if we knew what we knew today, I'm the ripe old age of 45, but if I knew what I was doing when I was 15, 20, I would have chaos in the world.
I mean, it's really interesting. I was gifted a book by a friend called Stillness is the Key, with regards to everything that's going on. But given just the pace of accelerated change, given by the use of our mobile phones and all this technology around us, how do you think about that? So, recently, for example, there was a great social anthropologist who actually came out with this whole study about the use of mobile phones being so corrosive to learning and all these kinds of things. Explain, how do parents start dealing with this, given that, they send their kids to school thinking that I want to keep Johnny safe, I want to make sure that they're engaged in their school life. It's a humongous issue that you as an owner of a family of schools must think about actively. So what is your advice for them?
Yeah, look, you've got to work out how you motivate people, how you influence people. And Vikas, if I said to you, don't do something, your immediate response will probably be to do it. And that's not only your manner, but also probably reflective of most young people in our society. So rather than saying don't do something, don't pick up your phone, let's find opportunities for them to broaden their learning journey and opportunities to actually not use their phone. So we know the power and the mindful aspect of just being one with nature. There's so much now been written about barefooted walking on grass, to enjoying the oxygen in the forests. So let's find more opportunities. And, we've been so limited by the Victorian classroom, that concept, maybe even before the Victorians, for 500 years, arguably, concept of having a teacher and 20 desks. So let's break those walls and really understand where learning can happen. That's the first thing. The second is, and I think the most powerful thing we could probably teach our young people is actually to read books. And I say that as someone who's severely dyslexic, ADHD, the notion of sitting down to read a novel or even something which is a book about a biography about someone inspirational, was an alien concept for many decades in my life. But I learned, and I can see it in my own children, just that ability to absorb learning a story single-handedly will be, I think, the defining factor in both their mental health, their ability to learn, and their ability to sit still.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of broadening the offering, broadening opportunities for students to do other things and distract them from their mobile phones. But the evidence is so tight now, like, in terms of so well proven and so well founded, that there is this growing movement about banning mobile phones in schools. And governments around the world are actually, taking this up. And the question is in home life. So imagine you're a parent listening to this. What would be your advice in home life as to how they navigate the use of phones and therefore social media and all these different platforms? Give a parent a pointer.
Yeah. So look, if the first aspect of leadership we just talked about is the ability to look after yourself, self-awareness. The second has to be around the notion of role modeling and creating a culture of positivity. So if you're going to ask your child to do it, you got to do it yourself. And
you sound like my daughters.
Absolutely. And, the young people, are just super, super observant. All the statistics about if your father's a doctor, you're more likely to become one, and so on and so on. If your children are, and so on. And similar applies to phones and all aspects of kind of embracing learning. But if you want the one tip, maybe everyone reads a book and have a dinner party discussion about it. And we've regularly at the dining table debated various topics, news, found a controversial topic and picked sides, and had my son on one side, me on the other, and the others are facilitated, and we've gone intellectually hammer and tongs at each other. But it's just created an opportunity for them to do a bit of research, a bit of fun, a bit of sparring, a bit of point scoring, in a topic that I think actually worthwhile them doing research. So let's engage the family in actually the concept of learning.
As someone who's been at the receiving end of a battering by your son in an economics argument, I concur. Aatif, one of the things that obviously when we speak about growth and leadership and your history in education, albeit very short history, is marked by that of strife, of tough times, of tragedy even. Do you want to talk about a little bit about that as to how that informs you as you go forward? Today's conversation is not meant to be all bleak and dark and all that kind of stuff, but I'm trying to help those that are listening to this podcast understand where you come from, and then talk about the nub of what we're trying to focus on, which are what are your three biggest lessons for high performance? So if you don't mind, if we go back to, for example, when you were a kid and having ADHD and dyslexia, and being a school reject, as it were, to being this incredible education entrepreneur and leader. Talk to us about the journey from there onwards until you founded Duke's.
So I've been, in one respect, incredibly blessed to preside over two wonderful education organizations, Cavendish and Duke's. to have met some extraordinary people, to have many deep, meaningful friendships, relationships, children, and colleagues in the sector, including yourself. In a relationship which is beyond just work now, and which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But equally, the flip side is my life has also been marred with a series of crises. And look, life happens, and probably the most pivotal situation was my mum passing away at the age of 6 through a medical mistake, and in those days, the notion of talking to a young child about what was going on, emotions, and dealing with it, effectively created a situation where I had not only effectively created PTSD, but also put me back in my own learning journey. And having dyslexia and ADHD, it exaggerated it and compounded the situation. So when I got to the age of 13, I was effectively diagnosed with, at that time, naughty boy syndrome, what today is modern day ADHD. Yeah. And naughty boy syndrome meant I got expelled from school. And perhaps ironic that the chair was for a reasonably large group now was thrown out of school. And so perhaps better than most people, I understand the value of a school place. But what I learnt from the series of crises, and everything from my eldest son passing away to triple fatality car accident that I was involved in, and going through a divorce, and lots of things have happened. But you pick up a sort of sense of resilience, clearly, but you also really have to go inward and work out what the essence of life is. And this is not meant to be a spiritual conversation, but it really does test you to look inside you and work out what your purpose is. And I think purpose in itself is kind of an overused term, and it's just banded around a bit like entrepreneurship. But it really you want to really understand of why you're here, what you want to achieve, and how you can have the greatest impact on society. And for me, that was very clear. And, I wanted for my children not to just grow up as a rich father, but somewhat a man of meaning, really have a sense of value, and give them a direction, a role modeling, and a real direction of leadership in their lives.
And so, I mean, you've talked about all the set of circumstances. You say life happens. Talk to us in terms of, like, I remember that story you once told me about getting the keys to your first school, and how that happened and where you've gone from there onwards. I hear about these stories, and you haven't told me this, but things like going into classrooms and, like, nowadays I see photos on social media playing rugby with the kids in your schools. Tell us in terms of, like, were you petrified, like the first day that you started? And does that still, like, is there a part of that still today in you, given the success that you've had?
Yeah, I think most leaders, if they're open, would claim to have imposter syndrome. I did. In 2013, I was fortunate enough to beg, borrow everything I could, remortgage the house, sell everything I had, and put completely my neck on the line, and actually the family house on the line, to borrow £5 million from a high street bank and buy our very first school. And as you said, as I stood outside the front gates, I was about to walk in, having completed the transaction and got through the adrenaline of kind of the legal process. I stood there, and I'm not one to cry very often, but I was in tears of joy, tears of anxiety, tears of the unknown. And, I was blown away, and I felt like sort of butterflies in my stomach. And, it was super exciting, and it was exciting for weeks and months on end. And I almost couldn't believe myself. And it was that sort of metaphorically pinching yourself. Wow, this is mine, and these people are looking at me in the staff room and expecting me to lead them. But what I've very clearly, very early recognized, that the best thing I could do was actually just level with them and build trust by being really truthful. And I was quite open with my vulnerabilities and my inability to kind of do much And so I spent a lot of time on the ground, and I realized actually that had a profound effect on inspiring the troops. So when we went away on our leadership retreats, I was the resident cook. If the toilets needed cleaning, I was quite happy to get a mop and a brush and do that. And where cover lessons were required, I was the first to volunteer. And that sort of engagement with children really allowed me to not only really understand the mindset of a teacher, but also allowed me to actually get feedback from the pupils. And there was no better way in today or back then in understanding what's good about a school. You go and ask a student forum, a student council, what the best thing about a school is, the worst thing, the best teacher, the worst teacher. They're always on the money. And it's given me great joy. And as a result, my week runs 2 days a week in London, running our UK schools, and then 2 days a week, typically in mainland Europe, running over there. And then Friday is a combination of charity work, but actually teaching in our schools. And I've kept that discipline up, and I think I'm a better person for it.
And what do you teach?
Random. Everything from politics, you will be pleased to hear, to I've done philosophy, mathematics, neurodiversity, and occasionally, rugby, football, climbing. I let the school decide, and the rugby thing was a bit brutal, doing full contact rugby in under 16s. I didn't get up for a few days after that, but a couple of weeks ago I was playing football, and even that I found pretty tough in the summer in the region.
So when we go to the nub of what this conversation, which is about high performance, I know you have, if you just look at the trajectory of Dukes, like in the last 9 years odd, you've gone from just having this aspiration of having schools which are within an hour of where you live, to being all over Europe. I've lost count of how many schools you have. Dukes was described as the fastest growing family of schools in the world. That must be quite a proud moment for you. But when you talk about like performance, I'm not just talking about financial performance, but how do you drive high performance in education is what I'm interested in. And so all of our listeners are going to tune in asking that question. And so what 3 lessons can you share with those that are listening to this podcast?
Yeah, so the first, I think, by some distance, and the really most important thing is to look after yourself. And I have made it my selfish desire to ensure I'm looked after, and my emotional, nutritional, physical health needs are met on almost a daily basis. So I get up really early, I pray, I read, I meditate, and I try and do some physical exercise at the home gym every morning before I sort of face the world. And that, I know, when I do that, I probably achieve that 6 out of 7 days a week. I'm better, fitter, and clearer in my thinking in leading my team. Not only that, it means I, with ADHD, can concentrate in meetings for longer than I would ordinarily. And that's the first thing I'd say.
Is it true that you used to tell people, tell me what you need to tell me within 5 minutes, otherwise I'll lose concentration?
Yeah, we have, and I'm regularly standing in meetings, so and sort of undue pressure on people who are comfortable and sort of, and we've shortened reports, plan on a page rather than sort of 10, 15, 20 pages. Send me a WhatsApp rather than email, because you can't write forever on those things. But yeah, simplicity is the ultimate art. It's really tough to do in business. And I think that, ironically, the dyslexic mind sort of allows that. I'll make life very complex. But I think the first thing in high performance is really look after yourself and looking after, and I think that rubs off. It means, and then you help people also to look after themselves well. And if we were in my office now, downstairs, you see a well-being area, you see a gym, you see a yoga studio. Upstairs, you see a brasserie with really healthy food. And that really importance of that, people-centric organization. And there's a wall, actually, which just sits outside my office, which, if you've worked 1 day at Duke's or done 10 years, your name's on that wall. And so you see this particularly spray of names, which runs across in quite small font. of everyone that's ever contributed to our journey, and recognizing that it's not buildings, it's not profit, it's not curriculums, it's the individuals which are the organization. And I think if you start to look after yourself and you start to look after other people, that's kind of where it's at. It's a people organization for first and foremost, and most organizations are. Secondly, I think we have to understand where we're going. And I when I look at my peers and I look at sort of other organizations, whether it's supermarkets or hotels or airlines, I think the ones which succeed are ones with a very clear plan. And it doesn't matter whether you preside at the low cost end or the budget end or the premium end of a sector. I think you have to have a very, very clear plan. You have to articulate that. It doesn't mean you're an extrovert, introvert, or orator or not, but you need to write it down. And your purpose, your strategy, your tactics, your mission has to be absolutely clear. Almost if you're dead and buried, the world will carry on. And we spend a lot of time as an organization really focusing on, what is that statement, what is those set of words, what are those values that everyone can really touch and feel, and it can't be just written down. You've got to sort of live by it. And we know that everyone will fight for a right, but you'll die for a cause. And really driving that sort of purpose statement and something which is bigger than the organization. So we're not here for Dukes to succeed on whatever metric you want to do. We're here to help education. We're here to help humanity. And so when you think about Dukes, think about leadership. When you think about leadership, for us, it focuses on three things. First is the sense of service. So what can we do bigger than us? So how can we help state schools? How can we help charities? How can we help the communities around us? Then the second is innovation and adventure. Let's have fun, but let's embrace all the new things, and the final is let's do it really well. And, that's drive that high performance, which is all about. So I think the second is kind of the sort of the high performance lesson is probably all this thing around high purpose, but it's been very clear about how we do it. And the final piece is, I think you've got to create a culture. So, we could have, I could be, and I'm not, a rock star, fit as you like, zen like, look like, well-read, literate. I could articulate the best plan in the world. I come up with the best idea. And we both know ideas are easy. It's the execution. But how do you execute? So we will do as individuals very little. We've got to create the environment in which that happens. And that means the culture of the organization needs to sing aligned in words, in narrative, in language. So if we were sitting in my office, Vikas, you'll see the values plastered everywhere across the organization. Instead of when you join the organization, when you apply for a job next week, hopefully, rather than getting your terms and conditions, you get a culture book. It's called Building the Crown, and you get my emotional contract from me to our employees, and you to me as an employee, what we mean by actually working at Dukes. And it's all of these little things in terms of how we look after you and how you look after the world. It really matters, and I think that's the best environment.
High performance in schools starts with a great school culture. It's the key to attracting and retaining the best teachers. Want to know how the best schools do it? Our Best School to Work program is your guide. Through our unique anonymous staff survey, we certify schools that have excelled in building the best culture and working environment, putting them on the map. And we give you the detailed analysis and benchmarking data you need to drive high performance in your school. Check out bestschooltowork.com today and find out how you can build an environment in which education flourishes because educators thrive.
No, and this culture point is such a big contributor towards high performance that even through the world's best school prizes that we do, we've seen that the schools that we shortlist actively work on aspects of their culture. And so Cardiff Sixth Form College is a good example of that, which was shortlisted a couple of years ago. Aatif, thank you for sharing those three lessons for high performance. But, I look at it in terms of like, why is it that we're still in such a sorry state when it comes to education? And so you look at any kind of rankings, you look at any kind of analysis that comes out. There's two points. One is on simple things like foundational literacy and numeracy in the world. Second is not just access to education, but just generally the quality of education. How do we do more as a sector to talk about ourselves and make sure that we're on the radar with policymakers and decision makers around the world?
Yeah, it's one of the sad realities. I think education often gets mixed with politics. And look, we've had a change of government in the UK. Last time this government came into power in '97, they devolved the relationship between the Treasury and the Bank of England and separated the setting of interest rates. And, if I had my one desire, it won't happen, but if I had my one desire for this new government to do would be to exactly the same in education. Create a national educational council to build a strategy which was long-term and was global in its outlook, and looked at the best ideas from different parts of the world. And a bit like actually the byproduct of your Best Schools Prize is actually highlighting high performance.
Yes.
And sharing that across the world. But if we had a council or a body that did it over a very long period of time rather than a parliament, we could actually influence change. And I think we are still short term in our thinking. And therefore, organizations, Dukes, which, fundamentally is built to be long term, built to be around multi generations and being built for 50 years, can actually start to make things happen. And we can do really daft things. Like have a training center in Italy and a training center in London, which on the payback on a 1, 2, 3 year return is just, it's not going to work ever. And don't look at the numbers, and my investors will hate you for saying this, but actually it's building a brand and building an engine for change. And there's just not enough people doing it, really. But it can happen because it's out there. And I think, that's what's wonderful about things like your prizes and just these various forums that we're part of. There's so much amazing things happening.
Yeah.
Just got to spread it. We don't have to create anything new. It exists.
How do you fix? I mean, given that one of your businesses is Dukes, but the first one was Cavendish. Cavendish focuses on special needs education. It seems to me a mass injustice in my mind the way that special needs kids and families are actually treated in our state system as well as private systems, frankly. And so how do you get your head around what needs to happen there?
Well, the first thing is we should not stop calling them special needs. The terminology I prefer to use, they're unique learning profiles. We all learn in a different way, and I learn different to you, you different to the next person or thing. And I think, if we stop looking at it from a derogatory point of view, and let's look at their strengths. And so on one level, we know that a third of the self-made millionaires, a high proportion of FTSE CEOs are dyslexic or have, somewhere on the spectrum. The stat that people don't know about is 75% of 18 to 25-year-olds in UK prisons who come in there for minor crimes are also children with learning needs. And we know that these children are the edge of education, at the inflection point. If we get them at the right time, as Cavendish does, we can completely pivot them. And our mission in Cavendish is 100%, not 99, not 98, 100% of these children will go off to further education or into employment to have a meaningful life. So I think all it is, we try for children to be confident, competent, characterful, and, have creativity. But the essence is really believing in these young people. And it applies to children with unique learning profiles, but it applies to people in the third world.
Sure.
It applies to people in the most elite schools. And we just need to believe in these young people. And we know that teacher that believed in us. And we know from the workplace, the mentor that believed in us, the coach, the person, the parent. And I think it's a universal trait. We just need real believers, optimists, and real recognition that these young people can actually change the world. And my role here is to facilitate that best person is going to put effectively someone on the moon or someone to develop the next technology in AI. And if you really, really believe that, you spend all your time with young people, and it's seriously fun and inspirational to do that.
For sure.
As they were on Wimbledon and many other things.
And so I think you touched on teachers for a second. And again, there was the UN Secretary General just last week published a blog on the crisis with regards to the teaching profession. And in fact, The Economist today published a piece regarding the morass that exists. And so, when you think about teachers, we have a huge issue in the world about no one wants to become a teacher. This, and the data kind of bears this out. Say a little bit more in terms of how you think about the future of the teaching profession and what we can do to uplift the status of teachers.
So firstly, they're heroes. And in the pandemic, I tried to do some online lessons, and it was just phenomenally difficult to get energy through the screen and to excite with children turning their screens on and off, and just engage in a classroom environment, and to do it in a live environment. The days where I do go in and out of the classroom, I love it, but it's really tough. And so they are not only a teacher, they're a mentor, they're a coach, they're a parent, they're a nurse, they're a social worker, and they're a counselor. So they've got so many different hats. And every year, certainly the UK regulator puts even more burden on the responsibility of teacher to find things that would be possibly an issue with the children. And so these people are heroes. And in society, we should reward our heroes and recognize them in a greater way. We should probably pay them a lot more. And there are many models, as you know, around the world where teachers are the status is equivalent to a doctor or other professional industries. And so there's a very clear mismatch. I think what I've tried to do is not only look after them from an economic perspective, but also tap into that intellectual curiosity. So we've built the most extensive learning and development program, 400 different live courses, where they come together and not only share things, but also learn things. And that really drives teacher retention. It's really helped teacher recruitment. And I believe one of the things we've been most successful at, why the growth has been so fast, is that stability in teacher that we've had. And, our head, senior leader and teacher churn rates are the lowest in the sector as a result.
So it would be, again, wrong for me not to ask you to name a teacher that has inspired you.
My the late now rugby and mathematics teacher, and he picked me up in my new independent school at the age of 13, and just spent a phenomenal amount of time with me on both the field with an oval ball, but just getting me through maths. And I went on to have a first class degree in maths and qualified in CFA and chartered accountancy and investment banking qualifications. And so, but I can see the love, the amount of time and dedication and real belief to take someone who's vertically challenged as me and as like that, and to make me the first 15 rugby captain, to really put a lot of energy behind me and real have belief that I can do an A-level and go on and have a career if I wanted to do in that subject. And phenomenal individual, sadly passed away very recently, and I had the real privilege of being at his funeral. And like me, there were many, many hundreds of former pupils who turned up to honor his memory. And what a life worth leading he was. Ray Cook.
Well, I look forward to learning more about Mr. Cook. Aatif, the final question I want to ask you on this segment is to do with the role of universities. And so almost all the children that come to your schools will want to obviously go into higher education. Given just the scale of disruption that exists, how do you see the role of universities and how they are changing? And what advice do you give for parents and other people who listen to this podcast as to how they should be thinking about qualifications in particular as kids grow?
Look, we are already seeing a change. So a number of pupils are going straight into the workplace. There are some very well-known companies, from banks to accountancy firms, law firms, which are taking people straight from school. And we can see in the data already that people the proportion of children doing gap years, and that isn't just bumming around on a beach somewhere, do actually purposeful, meaningful, interesting projects, real learning journeys, is increasing year on year. And, we need to tap into that. Finally, the variety of what you call university, but further learning, is also changing. Those in the arts and creative world are not doing conventional degrees, and it's quite acceptable. When you and I were going, we had to go to either Oxbridge or Redbrick University. Not that I got into one, but I think it's now much more interesting. People are looking at what's the best program, whether that's online, is that face to face, is that in the UK, is that overseas. We're seeing a growing demand in the States and in Europe. And should you do a 2-year course, 3-year course, 4-year course? And I just think that's wonderful, because actually a one size can't fit all, and the university sector is shaping and having to re-engineer itself to meet the demands of the young people.
Well, fantastic, Aatif. I think about your journey of being, a school dropout or being expelled from school, to being a professional athlete, if you want to call it that. Is that what you were? Is that how you talk about it? But by being commissioned as a British Army soldier, by going into investment banking, and now into education and building this incredible organization, you have achieved a lot. My question really is, are you proud of yourself?
I'm proud for my father, who single-handedly probably is the biggest influence on my life, and he bet the farm on my education, paying for it with the investment in time. And I feel very proud that for him, I've achieved what I have. For myself, I always think glass half full, and I've got to do a lot more. But no, I'm content, and I love it. I mean, to me, I've landed. It's the best job in the world.
Fantastic. And you're sitting in front of at least I think it's a real background, a bunch of books, a library. What's your favorite book? I'm trying to get into who is Aatif Hassan. So 3 questions.
Yes.
What is your favorite book? What is your favorite piece of music? What is your favorite film?
So favorite book, which I'm rereading for the 3rd time, is a book by an American chap called James Kerr. The book's called Legacy. I'm a big rugby fan. If I was not vertically challenged and wasn't thrown around as much as the ball was thrown around, I would have tried a career in rugby. Clearly not good enough. But this is a story about the All Blacks. Probably, in my view, one of the most successful international sports teams in terms of win rate, but a phenomenal culture. And there's one chapter which is called Sweeping the Sheds, which I particularly like, which is that real sense of servant leadership. And I love that. And I really believe that, no one should come to themselves. So that's in terms of book. In terms of film, if I had my way, 17, I wouldn't have joined the British Armed Forces. I would have joined the Royal Air Force. I watched a film called Top Gun. I wanted to become Maverick and Tom Cruise. I got the aviator glasses, and that's about
Who didn't? Who didn't?
And I went through the process, passed the medical, passed most of the exams. Unfortunately, fell down on the eye test, which happened in those days right at the end. And that's when I realized I was actually short-sighted and I couldn't join. They gave me a job on the floor, which I didn't want. If I wasn't flying a fighter jet, I wasn't going to do anything else. And in a grump, I went and joined the army instead. And in terms of song, I'm a big fan of Michael Jackson. Actually, I had the great pleasure of flying to Greenpoint Stadium in South Africa to hear him live at the Dangerous concert. And what a phenomenal performer he was. And there's a song called Man in the Mirror. I love the lyrics. And given we were talking about self mastery and personal mastery earlier, the lyrics always mean something quite a lot to me. So there you go.
Well, Aatif, thank you so much for joining us here today. I want to tell everyone in terms of if you've enjoyed this conversation, please hit the subscribe button on this podcast on whichever platform you use. The more people that subscribe, the better guests that we get, and the more conversations that we can have that are of value. Your 3 lessons, Aatif, and just to recap, so that everyone understands what you said. One is look after yourself, protect your asset, as some of us call it. The second is find your purpose. It's no easy thing to do, but a worthwhile endeavor. And the third one is understand where you're going. Is that right in terms of what is the key thing that you have learned from all of these high performance lessons that you think has been the thing that's unlocked all your success? Is there one of these that you think that you can point to?
Yeah, so third, just to clarify, was sort of create an environment, the culture, and
Culture.
the playground to thrive and people to thrive. Yeah, I think the first thing you could do is control the controllables in life. Spend 90% of your time in not what you can influence, not what you can't control, in the stuff you can control. So wake up in the morning and look after yourself. That's the one lesson.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Aatif.
Thanks, Vikas. Enjoyed it.
I thought that was a really great conversation with Aatif Hassan, who talked to us about his story from the origins of Duke's education, and even when he went through various trauma in his life, and what he very humbly could just call is the business of life, where he talked about three particular things when it comes to building high performance organizations. The first one that he talked about was looking after yourself, being a very big component of everything that happens. He talked about his personal daily routine, and actually his mental, spiritual, and financial being, and having a focus on that. And the second thing he talked about was, understanding where you're headed. And so that's the importance of planning in particular that he picked up on, and he encouraged all of us to look at it. And he spoke in specific about the three things that he does at Duke's in terms of having a clear plan. And the third point that he raised was really struck home for me, simply because of our focus on high performance, and that is to do with culture building. And how do you build a culture where you are able to get stuff done? And it was recently in an interview with Barack Obama that I saw. He said, what is the one superpower that young people need to learn about? And President Obama went on and said, just learning how to get stuff done. And so given that these three lessons and the universality of them, I'm really pleased to have Aatif join us today for this interview. Like I've said in the past, if you really enjoyed this conversation and learning about one of our leading lights in the education sector, please do download this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, share this podcast, and it's only by building a community that we will get more and more really high profile and prolific people to join us in these interviews. I'd be really grateful for that. Thank you so much for joining in today.